2017. I'm submitting this as a race between myself, Zik3, and Scrublord. This is Titan Souls, a top-down action puzzler that is heavily inspired by early Zelda games and Shadow of the Colossus. The game is pretty simple. You're given one arrow and you need to kill a bunch of bosses with it. You can run, you can roll, you can recall your arrow if you miss a shot, and getting hit a single time will get you killed. The action comes pretty quick in this game, so let me tell you about the first boss, SLUDGEHEART. SLUDGEHEART is where many runs go to die. SLUDGEHEART starts out as a single, large blob, and when it is shot, it splits into 3 smaller sludges. You need to shoot sludge 4 times in order to expose the heart, so you usually end up with a mess of sludges jumping around the room, and the closer you are to them, the more aggressive they are. This makes the fight very hard to manage, and very easy to buckle under, but also very rewarding. Unlike most of the other bosses in the game, there isn't a strat that's set in stone for SLUDGEHEART. Most of the fight comes from feel and experience with the boss. So knowing where the boss is going to split off to next, or knowing how aggressive the boss is going to get to on its next hop, is all it all comes from how long you've played the game. And being able to achieve a good kill and end up close to the exit is very hard to do. Up next we have iCube, and I think iCube is a great tell of how quick some of these kills are. You can miss some of these kills in the blink of an eye, and some of these timings require a lot of practice to achieve. iCube will just straight up kill you if you're even half a second late in pulling your arrow, and there are a lot of other bosses that if you miss your timing, you have to fight them casually, and you don't want to fight them casually because of how aggressive they are, how erratic their movements are, and just how difficult hard mode makes them. Our next boss, Brain Freeze, has an interesting puzzle around it, where you have to manipulate it in order to expose a fire in the middle of the room. Then using the fire, we can melt the cube, which acts like a shield for it. Bosses like these really show the puzzle aspects of the game, where the puzzles come from manipulating the bosses into exposing their weak spots and taking advantage of that. An interesting thing we do in this fight is hug the back wall after we've melted the cube, which saves us from Brain Freeze being able to smash on us when it starts hopping around. There's a rather interesting way of killing this next boss, which there's actually an achievement for, which is getting the kill by pulling the arrow back. This actually saves us a lot of time as we end up very close to the door exiting the tutorial area when the soul absorption animation finishes. Now that we have a little room to breathe, let me tell you about the category. The category being run is all bosses 100% hard. In total there are 20 bosses. So hard mode actually has some key differences to normal mode, one of them being that there's actually one more boss that we'll be seeing in the upcoming area. And other factors include the speed of bosses, the number of times they perform their cycles before being vulnerable to our arrow, and how erratic a lot of their patterns are. Now that we have a little bit of room to breathe, let me talk about the category. The category we'll be racing is all bosses 100% hard mode. In total there are 20 bosses. Hard mode actually has some key differences to normal mode, one of them being that there's one more boss that we'll be seeing in the upcoming area. Other factors include the speed of bosses, the number of times they must perform their cycles before being vulnerable to our arrow, and how erratic their patterns are. I think a race fits this category very well. It's pretty marathon safe, seeing as there are many checkpoints we can pick up before bosses, and dying to a boss may only set us back 15 to 20 seconds as a result. But it's also very exciting because of the difficulty. Some bosses require very precise movement and very quick reactions, and after the first boss, there's very little RNG in the rest of the run, so the race comes down purely to skill, which generally results in very close races. The next boss, OBELLO, is regarded as one of the tougher bosses in the run. It requires that you expose yourself to its spores in order to see its weak spot. Each runner has their own way of taking down OBELLO, which is pretty interesting in a race environment. The area that this boss is found in is kind of like a nod to the Lost Woods in Zelda, where you have a bunch of diverging paths that lead somewhere, but if you take the wrong path, you'll be reset back to the start of the area. In order to find OBELLO, you actually have to follow the mushrooms to find the boss, and this next boss, VINETHESIS, can be found by following a certain pattern that you find on a wall later on in the game in the ruins area. This next boss, Vinethesis, doesn't change much from normal to hard, other than that it has a few extra vines. They don't really make the fight any less manageable, so it's not really that tough of a fight. But the next boss that we're gonna see actually really plays with that, and I think you're gonna, see why immediately. So we actually used to omit this next boss, simply because we didn't actually know it existed. I couldn't tell you who found it, or how they found it, but the way to get to it seems to be to find this monolith in the forest, and then reverse the goad to get to the original Vinethesis, which is right, left, up. So here we go, left, right, up, and we end up at this place that looks very similarly like Vinethesis' lair. This boss is actually named Plant 12 in the files, so you're going to see why. Plant 12 is pretty tough. There are a lot more vines, they cover a lot more area, and usually there's a simple strat in Vinethesis where you can stand in one spot and shoot up, but one of Plant 12's vines actually blocks that, so you need to make a really, not difficult controller shot, but it's still kind of a risky controller shot. And the reason why you have to do that is because if you shoot from a particular area to get your arrow stuck in Vinethesis as it's sucking in, and then pull it, and it chops off one of the vines. I keep saying Vinethesis. Plant 12. Plant 12 will spin around in a circle, and it'll completely ruin the cycle. So it can be difficult if you don't know how to do it. This game actually plays out very interesting casually. As I said before, it's an action puzzler where instead of having environmental puzzles, the bosses are the puzzles, so it's very easy to die 20 or 30 times on a boss before you figure it out, and then die another 20 or 30 times until you get that shot, and I think it's very rewarding in that sense. This actually seems to be where a lot of runs split. You'll see some people take the next checkpoint at the ruins and then head off to the graveyard, and some will head straight into the bosses at the ruins. I personally like to do the ruins bosses because I think that they are the hardest. Titan Slayer ELHANAN, the next boss, we have a strat that requires a very specific shot in order to set up for the kill. So after I shoot ELHANAN's arrow, I'm going to walk into the center of this diamond and shoot to the corner and hope my arrow bounces off the pillar. Then I can roll out of the way of his arrow shot and pull my arrow into his arrow. The difference between hard mode and normal mode is that ELHANAN's arrow travels much faster, and it actually has to travel a lot further before it's vulnerable to our arrow. So we have to shoot our arrow a little higher up on that pillar in order for our pull to hit it, and for this pretty good strat to work as intended. So this next boss is Avarice, and Avarice isn't... well, okay, so we have a strat that makes Avarice really, really simple. We can basically cheese Avarice, but this is one of those strats where if you don't know that it exists, Avarice is kind of hard because of how crazy it is. So you're going to see Avarice teleport about 5 times and just freak out and shoot coins, and it's kind of, it feels like it's non-stop. It feels like it goes on forever, especially if you're running around the room. But luckily we can just sit between these coins. The coin that it shoots out just sort of disappears. I don't think it actually goes anywhere. And we wait for Avarice to open its mouth, and then we just kill it. So here we get to show off saving and quitting. If we take a checkpoint at a certain area, the game automatically saves. And when we kill a boss and perform the soul absorption, the game also saves. So if we quit after a soul absorption, we don't need to do the walk from that boss's lair back to the checkpoint. And because we're pretty far from the checkpoint and we need to go in the opposite direction, we can save and quit and be much closer to the graveyard. This next boss, GOLIATH, is also one of those bosses where killing it quick is very desirable and also pretty simple. But if you don't kill GOLIATH quick, Bull Hevel is easily one of the harder bosses. It doesn't look like there's ever an opening if you don't pull your arrow into it, and it shoots 3, 5, and 7 of these balls that just bounce everywhere, and it makes the fight incredibly unmanageable and just not fun because you spend most of your time just dodging. So, Titan Souls was actually run at AGDQ 2017 by Zik3. He had done 100% normal mode, and it did surprisingly well. Zik had a lot of people come up to him and tell him that the run was amazing. We all stayed up at night to watch his run, and we thought his commentary was very good, and he ran it incredibly. But ever since that run, we've actually had the community grow quite steadily, and we've had a lot of people climbing the leaderboards, a lot of people submitting runs to almost every single category, and a lot of people just showing and expressing a lot of interest in runs, expressing a lot of interest in finding new strategies, and just a whole lot being added to the community. We're actually able to host race nights on Mondays. We can get quite a few people to come and race with us. We do bingo races, we do 100% races, we do just any category we can think up, no matter how silly or how much fun. We've done no roll, we've done keyboard only. We've done a lot of really silly things, and it's fun to see a lot of people just come together and be part of the community, and we're so welcoming. We're constantly in other people's Twitch channels, we're always helping people learn, and I think that just as much as GDQ will be able to help us as a community, we'll also be able to help GDQ in that we can bring a lot of excitement over there with a really interesting race. An interesting tidbit about this game is that it was originally made for Ludum Dare, which is a 48-hour game development competition, and the theme for that one was you only get one. So in the case of Titan Souls, we only got one arrow. A demo for the game featured 3 tutorial bosses, minus Sludge, which made it a really good demo, and it could be beaten in about 2 minutes. And it's actually pretty incredible to see how far it came from that. I mean, 3 bosses to 20 bosses, and this gigantic overworld, and this incredible music. It's really cool to see something be fleshed out like that. So this is Molcan. Molcan also doesn't change much from its normal counterpart, except that it gets bigger, so it actually looks a lot scarier. But we can actually reuse the strat from normal mode and hard mode, where it spits a bomb out and it has the bomb land on itself, which is, I think, pretty humorous to watch. A problem with the bosses in the magma area isn't so much that they change from normal to hard, it's mostly that they have these really small windows of times to shoot their weak points. So Molcan is one of those bosses where it's very easy to miss its hitbox, because it's kind of wider than it is tall. And Golcan over here is one of those bosses where you have a really small amount of time to shoot it in the back before it just spins around and tries to crush you with its giant mace hands. So this section gets really difficult, and actually the next boss is much like iCube, but a lot quicker. So we're going to see that in a minute. In a marathon run, we would actually take this checkpoint before hitting any of the bosses, just in case something happens, because we'll actually get set back about 1.5 minutes if we die and go back to the ruins area. This is Rolcan. Rolcan is enough to give you a heart attack. It comes rip-roaring fast, and I mean, not even a split second, and you can die to this boss. This is also where a lot of runs go to die, and it sets up this next area really nicely, which becomes a lot more technically difficult than just like reactionary, I guess. So the next area we're going to go to is the ice area, and I think it's pretty interesting. When I talked about puzzles before, bosses being the puzzle, there is a puzzle that kind of comes back to you, where we melted Ice Cube's outer shield by using fire. So we're going to see an actual overworld puzzle where we have to light a bunch of torches and there's a single torch that we can use in order to open up a cavern for our next boss, ONYXIA. We're going to be taking the checkpoint before going to any of the bosses in this area because we're going to introduce you to death warping, which is dying while the soul absorption cutscene is going on. ONYXIA's body hitbox, which can kill you, stays active after it has died. So we can actually roll into it after we've triggered the soul absorption cutscene and skip a whole bunch of time and end up warping back at that checkpoint. ONYXIA is a very specific boss because ONYXIA actually moves around the second you entered the cavern. So we have a strat where we just immediately swim up to this middle iceberg and trigger the fight as quickly as possible so that ONYXIA always comes out of the same area. If you go into the boss room and stand around for a little bit, ONYXIA will actually jump out of the water at a different time. YETI is very easily regarded as the toughest boss in hard mode because of how aggressive it is, how quick it is, just how many times it rolls around. Now that looked really, really easy, but I promise you, it is so easy to die to YETI. It's almost incredible. You can get crushed by the icicles that fall down after it rolls into any of the walls. YETI rolls really, really quickly, so if you're close to any of the walls, you are basically dead, and then you have to make a very specific shot that you have a small window of time to make once it lands. So this next boss, Stratus, is a pretty interesting boss. Its hard mode counterpart has these two arms that comes up and tries to hit you with these ice beams. It's actually possible to kill it in one cycle, but I unfortunately missed the shot. A second cycle lose you about 5 seconds, which is kind of unfortunate, but it makes the fight all that much easier. Getting the one cycle is pretty hard because you have both of these arms to dodge, and you have to get as close as possible without getting blown away by the smoke that Stratus blows as it pops out of the ground. So now that we've killed Stratus, we actually only have 3 bosses left to do. GOLIATH, the Soul, and Truth. From the ice area, we have to go up to the tower area, which is north of the overworld, through this door that we actually unlocked about 7 or 8 kills ago. But we're doing 100%, so we need to get those kills. These next 3 bosses are basically a gauntlet. By this point in the run, your heart is beating, you know you're going to get a PB, you know you're getting close to the end of the game, that these bosses will really play with you. They have very, very small windows of time in order to kill them, and their movement changes quite a bit from normal to hard. GOLIATH gets a lot faster, but like a lot faster. You have to get its hands to smash on these pads, and it's actually pretty hard to get both hands to smash down on these pads in one go to get the one cycle. The Soul, we have a very consistent strat in normal mode to kill the Soul. It's one of those bosses that if you don't know how to do it, it could take you a very long time. And we trivialized it in normal. In hard mode, we still have it kind of trivialized, but it still feels a little off because they're not just completely D-pad strats. We have to use the joystick a little bit. We have very specific movement to go through and a very specific shot to make. And there are a lot of things that sort of affect this fight that can really hurt the run. And then we have Truth, which I'll get to a little later. Truth has 3 phases, and the entire thing is just really tough. So here we have GOLIATH. GOLIATH is just this like sleeping giant at the top of this tower, and is waiting to crush us with his hands. So unfortunately I get a death over here by missing 1 pad, running back, triggering the wrong arm, and then dying. But you know, this isn't so bad. I only lose about 15 seconds from this. It's a quick death. I'm right back in the action. So what we're meant to do is get this arm to smash down on the pad, get the other one to do the same thing, and then before we get crushed, shoot its weak spot. And then what I did there are actually 2 very interesting tricks going on. One was the GOLIATH clip, which lets us clip behind GOLIATH when we're not actually supposed to be able to do that, which is sort of abusing this small bug. And then we have this, which is the infinite roll glitch, which if we cross into a new scene or a new zone while doing the soul absorption, triggering the soul absorption animation, we can roll and then get this infinite roll, which just shoots us far forward really quickly, but we don't have a lot of control over it. So this is the soul. The soul's really tough, and we get it done pretty quickly. The soul can actually suck your arrow in. The soul lets these electric little balls fly around, and the soul has very, very good accuracy unless you're holding your arrow out. It tries to shoot at your origin, but misses just by a little bit, and that arrow can actually come back and fall in front of you using the strat I was using, and you can shoot it and it just ruins everything. So the soul, there are a lot of different things that can happen to ruin the fight, and it's really lucky that it ended that way. The truth has 3 phases. So this is the first one that we can kind of abuse using this north wall glitch. Generally, if we do that phase regularly, the ring that you're supposed to shoot will just fly around the place and it'll try to get away from you, but by using that strat and staying on the wall at the far right, it won't do that. Then we get this second phase where we get 6 of these shark-like things that come after us before we're able to shoot the eye that pops out of the south ring. So here we have 3 of the sharks, and we can manipulate them by running very far south in that fight and having that top one spawn actually under the eye. If we don't do that, it'll spawn over the eye, and it's very possible that we just cannot hit it, and then we get shot by the laser coming out of truth. So there are just like, there's a lot of stuff happening in those last 3 bosses, and it just goes one after another, and it's, as you can see, it's very easy to die to some of them, and there's some very rough spots. But that's Titan Souls. That's hard mode 100%, all bosses. Thanks for watching.